Good International Men's Day to you. Welcome to the Men's Human Rights Weekly Talk. And we went to number one, baby! International Men's Day, the number one tweet in the world for a 3-hour sustained period. Big thanks to the UK and India, especially. Those countries really came through. And I'm in a better mood than I almost ever am when I'm talking about the men's rights movement. We were saying a few hours ago how this is not really a very happy day because the issues we talk about in International Men's Day are very tragic and very sad issues. But you know what? There's not a lot of excuses to celebrate in this movement, but we have one today. We went to number one in the world, in the entire world, the number one tweet for a sustained 3+ hours. India was number one. International Men's Day was the number one tweet in India for 11 consecutive hours. 11 consecutive hours. India, you guys did freaking awesome. England, UK in general, Ireland, the British Isles did very well. UK peaked at number 2 overall. England and Wales went to number 2. Scotland and Northern Ireland went to number 1. Ireland went to number 3. Canada went to number 5. Now, the US has not done very well. We peaked at number 12. And part of that is because it's college football Saturday in America, which Europeans don't know what that means. Trust me, it's like a cult over here. It dominates Twitter every single week. There's nothing else you can do about it. A very sad observation was Australia did terribly. Website that I used, which I'm going to link in the description below, which, as we've recently realized, doesn't really help if you're watching this after the fact, because you can't really click the link, obviously. But it's called Trend24, and it's really cool. I've been kind of obsessing over it all day. What it does is it shows you the top 50 trending tweets, the top 50 current hashtags, and you can scroll back like up to 12 hours ago. You can basically scroll back by hour, back to 21 hours.
Lou? Lou still there? Your mic's there.
He's left us.
Seems so.
A tragic loss. Anyway, the International Men's Day has been going quite well. Some of our admins have been going around posting posters, and well, I'm hoping that other people are going to start sending me in their videos and pictures of their posters around town. If you don't know, we have a pack of posters on the server. You can find it on the website too at menahuman.com/imd, and we have been putting them up all over the place. I am hoping that Blue is going to come back at some point, but if not, I'll just keep talking. We've had some interesting stuff going on. The UN Women account has, of course, tweeted their annual "Thanks to Men Who Support Women" tweet. They didn't even bother to format it cleanly this time. It was just sort of, it looked like it'd been dumped in there like copy paste or something. Yeah, they've also tried to they tried to celebrate quote unquote International Toilet Day too, which is a legit day, but it shouldn't be this one because this is the only day we have.
How long was I disconnected?
3 minutes.
Like,
what's the last thing you heard? What's the last thing you heard me say?
Honestly, don't remember.
I didn't know it was going to be a test.
Yeah.
Wait, what's the last thing you heard me say?
You were talking about all the different places that International Men's Day.
Oh yes, okay.
One in.
Okay, so I got cut out when I was saying the places that did well. The places that did not do well, Australia had 0. This website that I used here is called Trends24, and you can look at the top 50 tweets per hour by country. And International Men's Day did not crack the top 50 a single time in Australia over the entire International Men's Day. That tells me something that I've heard before is true. I've heard MRAs from Australia say that feminism there is so toxic and so oppressive that people would be scared to tweet that. And I can see evidence of that now. But I also want to talk about this toilet day crap and just how scummy the UN really is, because let's understand what they did. By scheduling toilet day on the same day, they were trying to make it into a competition, and they knew that people were going to be making fun of the name toilet day, even though toilet day is actually about something very important. It's about clean water and sanitation. So they were trying to manipulate people, especially MRAs. They were trying to manipulate MRAs into criticizing a project to improve sanitation in poor countries. I mean, how scummy is that? What trash, what absolute trash the UN is for doing that. Because they could have easily chosen another day. We're not saying toilet day isn't important. We're saying, why did you have to put it on the same day as International Men's Day? That was not an accident. That was so manipulative, so disingenuous, so scummy. You can see in the text chat that I tweeted it. I tweeted at them. We did go to number one. International Men's Day was the number one tweet in the world for about 4 hours. And I think that trend is only going to continue.
Good. I am only just hearing about the toilet day thing. I had no idea of its existence until both of you mentioned it. For some reason, I just did not cross my feed at all. I rarely go on like Twitter and stuff, so I'm not on the ball like that, but it is very disingenuous to do that, especially on the exact same day. It's a bad look, like it's just bad.
Unfortunately, that's the United Nations for you, and in particular UN Women. They're not exactly known for their fairness in some of the takes they come up with.
No.
It's things like, what was it, 40% of the homeless are women, or whatever the statistic was. Or was it 40% of the homeless are women? And so, the other 60% then? And the other one saw recently, what was it? Something to do with, I think it was to do with suicide.
Oh, it's very high. I think it's men's side is like 74% or so. I know that's in America. I don't know of it in the UK. I'm sure I think it's actually, oh no, I know what you're talking about. I actually heard this from a few sources that they were saying there have been more deaths this year from men committing suicide than there have been from any war post 1945 of British men. I believe is the statistic you're referring to. Yes, every war outside of, since 1945, the end of World War II, there have been more deaths in Britain or the UK this year by suicide alone than there has been for any soldier casualties of war in the last almost 80 years, which is horrific to think about.
It's a frightening statistic, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely terrifying.
Oh, I remember what the other UN Women one was now. It was to do with journalists that had been killed in the last 12 months.
Oh, yes, I did see that one as well.
And because
it went up like it for the women, I believe it went from like something like 6 to 12% of journalists have been killed. So it jumped for them, or I think it might be gone from like 8 to 12 or something like that. And I've heard other people saying that it's because there are less men in journalism now, which is why this statistic rose. So it may not even be directly correlated to female journalist deaths. Hard to say. I didn't really look too far into that one, but I did see it in multiple places where, jump from like 8 to 12% of female journalists dying. And that's a catastrophe. It almost seems like they're trying to push that more men need to die. That's not okay. Like that's it needs to stay the same or lower. We need more men die. Be what they're getting at. It's just they didn't really push against that.
Yeah, I because obviously MRA sort of went, well, hang on a minute. You're saying, this number or this percentage of journalists killed in the last 12 months were women. Well, what were the rest of them meant? You're talking about the minority here. It's a bit. You've been a bit silly on this one. We got called out on to TikTok and what have you. The people that are pushing back against us are pushing back because they're losing control of the narrative, losing control of the argument.
Yes.
And it's happening year on year, as Blue pointing out the fact that International Men's Day trended for 10 plus hours because of what was going on in India, and 3 hours consecutively globally. That's quite a statement from 5 or 6 years ago.
And that's a country with 18% of the world's population, and they kept it sustained for 10 plus hours. Number 2 in the UK, number 1 in the world.
Yeah,
amazing.
It's about
you rarely
time.
see anything like it. Yeah, because basically I don't know how you guys are, but every International Men's Day kind of just comes up and then leaves.
Yep.
And I never really see it anywhere. Never have I seen it talked about, brought up, mentioned, anything like that. And usually there is always some, off the cuff, crappy thing somebody does to just kind of insult it. Kind of reminds me of the toilet day thing, because it's not saying that it's not important. It's just very insulting, like you mentioned, Blue. And we will see stuff like not all Men's Day land on it, and they just, it feels almost like men are not allowed to be proud of who they are ever. At least that's the narrative that you feel from this kinds of stuff. Because they're almost, I remember one year, I think a few years ago, 2016 or something, they tried to make it another International Women's Day land on today, or women in careers, I think it is, women in professions.
They've done that this year.
They tried to make it. They did that this year too. Yeah, you see, it's always.
It's International Women's Entrepreneurship Day.
That's what. Yeah, exactly.
The government's
And
tweeting that, by the way.
Are they really?
They are. The government's tweeting that. International Women's Entrepreneurship Day stuff.
Which government? Which tweet?
America. I'll show you.
Oh, of course.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised either.
Man, you think you'd be, happy to bring up men's issues and talk about how there's a ton of them that are just ignored by mass media, and that, it's the same people that are doing the plumbing, the electrician, the building your house, stuff like that. Like, these people we're all, not us specifically, but maybe us, but a lot of men are hurting, which is why the suicide rate is so high, which is why, it's like 92% workplace fatalities for guys. You'd think that would be an important issue, especially on today, In
terms of percentages, the workplace fatalities is even higher for men in the UK. It's 97%.
It's 97% in the UK?
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I did a video on
this would matter.
I did a video on this, if I recall. This was as of 2-3 years ago, so who knows if it's changed at all since COVID. But men in the UK are 23 times more likely to die at work.
Because we're still doing the dangerous jobs. As I nearly found out to me cost earlier on this week.
Which is why it's somewhat ironic that they bring up toilet day. And I'm like, who's the people working on the plumbing, on the water, on the sewage? Yeah. It's almost entirely dominated by men. So it's a tad disingenuous and weirdly ironic that they even bring it up.
Yeah. And it's like that. Have you guys seen that video of the guy changing the light bulb on the radio tower? I think it's a radio tower.
Yes, I have seen that. It's terrifying. That dude is basically, 1,100 feet in the air,
Yeah.
waiting to just drop to his death. And it's sad, that this is 4 hours sustained is really impressive. Well, for MRAs, it's really impressive for International Men's Day. I've never seen it be that long ever. It rarely hits number one period, so it's really impressive for us. But in the grand scheme, it's a bit sad that 4 hours sustained for the day that's dedicated to it. I'm happy for it, but I'm guessing you guys can see where I'm coming from. That it's you expect it to be there like 12 to 18 hours for the day, because that's how it happens for like International Women's Day. It just lasts like the entirety of the day, sometimes more than a day, is being like the number one trending thing.
As it should do at the end of the day.
Yeah.
No, we're not criticizing the fact that that's trending. It's more a case of, it's like the opening scenes of the Red Pill movie, if you've seen that.
Yes.
When they were talking about it's the largest gathering they've seen in one place to discuss men's issues, and there was like a couple of dozen people there.
Yeah, it was very small.
Yeah, celebrating the fact, and you think,
you had more people protesting it than you had people there to actually learn something about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weird to see, man. It's weird to see, because you don't see this kind of flack for basically any other activism group.
No.
Generally speaking, especially one as so generic as men. They need help. Like it's such a simple thought.
It is. But unfortunately, it does give, it does show how powerful the other narratives that have been pushed by other groups have been.
Yeah.
And, people say, well, you're a white heterosexual man. What have you got to be upset about? Well, yeah. And what has my race and sexual orientation got to do with anything? It doesn't tell you what my experience in life has been. So go and sit down there over in the corner and let the adults talk, please, if you're going to come out with that kind of nonsense. I don't want to hear that.
It's baffling to me, because you really don't see it anywhere else.
No.
With this kind of annoyance. Like, we're almost like looked at with an eye roll for saying that too many men are dying of suicide, of dropping out, or, not just dying, but like dropping out of college, workplace fatality percentage. Like, these are like, if these issues were flipped and it was women dying at like 92% or 97% in the UK for workplace fatalities, there would be such an insane uproar, and there should be. There absolutely should be. People should be outraged at that.
Imagine
you
if
just would expect,
Imagine if life expectancy were reversed and it was women who died 5 years younger. It would be an international crisis. It would be like the top project of the UN to fix.
Yeah, the governments would be dropping billions of dollars to find out why it's happening and how to fix it.
I've obviously, Blue, you would have been keeping up to some of this stuff on TikTok, but the British versus American thing that's been going on ever since the Queen died. There was a content creator on TikTok who made a video where she was asking why we make fun of school shootings, which is another story entirely. And then she mentioned Nigeria and the kidnappings. And I stitched that video and said, if you think that it was just kidnappings that was going on with Boko Haram, you've got absolutely no idea. Over 2,500 dead men and boys will attest to that. So, that's just another,
nobody.
Another social narrative.
The only most Americans were either respectful or just indifferent, a little insensitive towards the Queen. The only negative thing I heard about the Queen was that little twerp Silius on TikTok, who can't stop lying, who made a video mocking her. He's a leftist feminist trash, so nothing to be surprised about there.
He mocked one of the most powerful women that has ever lived, and he's a feminist. And Kevin Samuels used to say, "You cannot make this up." Oh, bless his little. I've seen your video you stitched with him, Blue. I think I've got jokes that are older than him. I've certainly got underpants that are older than him. Bless him.
He's just unbelievably. I don't want to spend International Men's Day talking about him, but he's unbelievably. He doesn't say the smartest things. So let's just say that.
No, of course he doesn't. He's indoctrinated, and that's the
Yeah.
problem. And we had somebody join earlier on the server, so they wanted to learn about MRA ideology. There is no ideology associated with being an MRA. If anything, our ideology is the truth.
Yeah.
It has to be.
I disagree that we don't have an ideology, but I also disagree that ideology is not the same as truth, because ideologies can be true. Ideology just means a set of ideas.
Well,
We
I
all
think
share
when-
a set of ideas.
I think the way Mike was meaning it was we don't have like dogma.
Yeah, it's
So,
not. Oh, patriarchy's causing all this. It's like, no, there's a massive amount of issues that are causing the problems that we talk about. You know,
the ultimate success of the men's rights movement would be the men's rights movement no longer having to exist.
yes. Like how many times have we
100%.
said that, Blue? We would. I think Les and I have said it on many times. We would quite happily disappear into the shadows, go and watch cat videos, eating Cheetos in our underpants. We would much prefer to do that because it's easier, better for our own well-being, as it were. But we're not in that position. We can't do that. We can't stand by idly any longer and let things carry on the way they are.
And the difference is feminism would never let go of power. They would never.
No.
There is no stopping point.
No, there isn't.
Because which is weird, because you would think any movement, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt it, any movement that exists for a reason. There is a end goal for that movement. Now, for at least in the UK and the United States, the women having equal rights, which is, I assume, the ideology based around feminism, is the equality between man and women, even though they like to change it every once in a while to include other things. That's the basis of the reality. It's men and women treated equally across the board. If you look at laws today, it's about as equal as it could possibly get. Like, even some laws in America have existed since 1960s, which was along the lines of, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was along the lines of men and women should be paid equally, independently based on their gender. Like, it has absolutely no thought onto how much you pay someone, and that was passed in the 1960s. Granted, it hasn't been flawless up to the way, but civilization is never flawless. It is a constant building, and like, it's just crazy to me to see that where is the goal? We've reached it. Men and women, or at least in the sense of laws, maybe not the use of those laws, but the laws themselves are equal across the board.
I think
so. Where's your ending?
Their end goal, I think, if there is one, would be equality of outcome, which, as Jordan Peterson has said on multiple occasions, is just plain dangerous. The steps you would have to take in order to get equality of outcome is, ridiculous. So
Right, and even then,
a dictatorship, a feminist theocracy. It would become like the mandatory state religion would be anti-patriarchy.
It weirdly is shifting in that direction, though. If you look at regular media, they depict, even in like something as recent as like Olivia Wilde's new movie, which I'm pretty sure she was an actress beforehand. I don't know when she got into directing, but it was entirely based. They used Jordan Peterson, who I see objectively as a very fair person. He usually uses like his clinical psychology background and science text to create his own opinions generally, or he just usually uses that as the facts. And this is what we know right now. And she said in an interview at one point that she used him to make the villain of this movie that she put out. I haven't watched it yet. I'm going to, out of
She's
curiosity,
clueless.
but
she's ignorant
just-
trash.
honestly, that's terrible. That's a terrible thing to do.
Doesn't know what she's talking about. She's like all these other Hollywood types. I worked in that industry. They are so full of themselves. They are so narcissistic. They are so deluded. In my opinion, they're utterly worthless. Olivia Wilde is a worthless person. She brings nothing to society whatsoever. She does nothing good for anybody. These Hollywood types, these feminist types, they do nothing but hate and they do nothing but lie.
Well, irony of ironies, she and old Harry Styles are split up. I heard today. You know,
Oh, shocking.
Good for Harry.
I'm shocked because wasn't she married with 2 kids from like
yes.
her husband, and then she inexplicably just cut it off to go with Harry Styles. She just basically threw her husband in the trash, took the kids, and just went with Harry Styles. And now they're breaking up, which is she's home wrecking all over the place. Even I don't mean to delve into Olivia Wilde, but like she wrecked her home to be with like you know, one of the highest celebrities on the planet, and it didn't work out. Again, everyone's shocked. Nobody saw this coming. And put out a movie on a headpiece basically towards Jordan Peterson and the men's rights movement is, you know, relative. They're not really mentioned, obviously, but she's just swinging, you know, she's just swinging at guys just trying to help other guys.
She's ironic. Really,
Yeah.
truthfully, but you know, you can't really take account for these people. They're just insane. There's no other way to describe it. They are just mental, absolute nut jobs, a lot of it.
And it would be less offensive if it wasn't so normal. Like seeing that is just normal. That's the same that it's always been. Like it's always, since for the last like, at least in my life, like 30 years, the last 20 years has been non-stop firing in all cylinders. Men are bad, but then it's just been only getting worse since then. Like before it was, maybe men aren't always right, which is totally fine. And then it went more into men are wrong a lot, men are wrong, men are trash. And then you see like kill all men trend on Twitter for an amount of time. And you're here as a guy just going like, I'm just eating Cheez-Its, watching a movie. Why am I part of this? I haven't done anything.
Group
Basically
blame,
religious
blood
dogma.
guilt. It's not a religious dogma, it's a political ideology. Atheists do this too, like politicians do this too. There's nothing special about it, it's just tribalism. But what's really, really, really insidious about it is that this is basically destroying our society. It is unpicking the two genders and forcing them apart deliberately. And I mean, this is all done in all sorts of little ways. This is a generation that's been raised on Homer and Family Guy and all these shows where dads are just idiots. They're idiots and they're malicious and they're evil and they don't care about anything except the thing that's right in front of their nose, and they bumble about causing trouble for everyone, and if they weren't there everything would be much better. Whereas the girls are all amazing, super geniuses, hackers, Lisa Simpson, you know the sort. It's like this goes back to the Crosby era. There's I hate to bring him up, but there's a clip on that show of like the little girl telling the boy that's like basically outsmarting like everyone older than her, but there's loads of clips of that. But it's this thing where it's like every show has to have the little girl who's so much smarter than their dad, and it's crazy. She never sarcastically back talks the mum, but she'll take the dad down a peg or two every time he says something, and the dad will just look at her and go, "That's my daughter. She's smarter than I am, even though she's barely out of nappies." And I mean, it started as a joke because why would a toddler be smarter than the dad? But even back in the Cosby era, it was segueing into this, basically this ideology. You can see feminism in that show, like loads of it, and you'll see like the little girl telling off the boy and all this sorts of stuff. It's this echo throughout all of media, where you have all these tropes like rape of men in prisons is considered funny, and they make jokes about it in cartoons and things like that. There are people who've done compilations of these rape jokes in all sorts of media on YouTube. They've done multi-passes on it, like same rape joke in everything from Third Rock to the Sun to SpongeBob a couple of times to Guardians of the Galaxy to basically every movie with every comedy movie with police in it. It's crazy how common it is, and it's just unquestioned. And the same's true for this attitude against dads, and it all feeds into this contempt for men. That's the thing. People have forgotten that men are the protectors of society, they are the builders of society, and all this sort of stuff. And they zero in on the criminals instead and go, "We don't need men anymore. There's nothing to protect us from." Oh, if there was a war, men would be held up as champions. Again, you can bet it. And the woman would be like, "Oh, I'm just the feminists would be like, "Oh, I'm just like a fragile little flower, and I have to get back into this escape bus and cross the border. Oh, sorry, you can't cross the border. You're a man, or you're a teenage boy, actually," because they, like in Ukraine, they were stopping teenage boys crossing the border, so that they had to go back and fight. And it's this, then they get to the UK, and it turns out all the survivors there are women, and it's like only the women are allowed to get, they're put on priority lists for the housing, but the men aren't, so the men are homeless if they even manage to get there. It's up to 65 years. It's basically, if you're ready to retire, you don't have to participate in this war. So yeah,
It's terrible because you see this kind of stuff even in today, like how you're mentioning with the Ukraine. If you when you go there, or not when you go there, but even just the announcements from Zelensky and what it is, because when you get down to the reality of it, it's men that are going to be fighting, and not just men. Well, not only just men. It's not just artisans. You have like a shoemaker who's going to be fighting. You're going to have a construction worker that's going to be fighting. You're going to have a dentist, a doctor. Just when it comes down to war and reality, they just see man, war, and that's it. And they let all the women go, which it's not that men want women to fight in wars. Generally speaking, we don't. At least in my views, I'm totally fine with it's just what men should be doing. I'm upset with it, but it's the biological imperative of war. It just is what it is. The problem I have with it is almost entirely based on that it's ignored. The sacrifices that men have made across all of time, throughout every civilization, is just, at least in the West, reduced down to men are pigs and bad people, and they're help conform to this rape culture that we have around us, and all of this. It's just brought down all the way to just superficial men are trash. And it's so weirdly demonizing that it's weirdly ignores the fact that not we as in us, but we as in a populace, as men, as people, have been hunting, have been creating civilizations, have been building the foundations everywhere we go. Even the United States, it's only 250 years old, and it built itself on the back of the UK's parliament. Our law, justice, and judicial, all of our branches are based on it. It's just the building blocks of other men over and over and over and over until we've gotten to today. And many men have died in so many wars and genocide and all this. Like in Nigeria, when you were mentioning that earlier, there was a kidnapping of girls, and it was terrible. We all agree that it was terrible. But it went to completely ignore like the thousands of little boys that were burned alive. And nobody cared. Nobody said anything, at least in our news system. Nobody said one thing mentioning it. You would never see a broadcast, or it was just glazed over. And it would say like 2,000 people killed. And then when you look into the numbers, it is like one girl and then 1,900 men, boys, children, 7-year-old boys just learning to reading a book. It's horrific. It's just sad. I don't mean to bring everyone down, International Men's Day. It's the reality of it.
Yeah, and they like to pretend that they only hate women getting an education, but it's children generally. They generally let the girls go. Like, this was the first time they didn't let the girls go. And then eventually they let a lot of the girls go anyway. But if they capture a boy, the boy has two fates. Either he's burnt to death, or he goes to the ISIS training camp or the Boko Haram training camp, and he is abused, he is brainwashed, he is beaten into submission until he fights for their cause. And then the Western forces, they don't go in and rescue these boys. They don't raise up a Twitter campaign, and if you don't have Michelle Obama going on TV saying how horrible it is, they bomb them. That's what they do. They bomb them. They shoot them. They treat them as a threat. Like, you go back to the Iraq War and you'll see all of this stuff there as well. They, like soldiers talking about, oh, you've got like some 12-year-old, 11-year-old, 9-year-old boy strapped with bombs running towards you. What do? You shoot him. And then you don't go and inquire where that boy came from. You don't find out who was holding the remote detonator. You just carry on. You eradicate the forces, and if any boys do get freed, it's totally incidental. Because what they do when they see one of these training camps or things is they bomb them. That's what they do. And that's why the US government has a definition of a terrorist, which is any male, provided there isn't extreme proof that he's not a terrorist. And good luck getting them to, accept your proof. Because this is a definition set up to ignore men. And boys. A lot of boys. Because, you can argue quite a lot about who was a man and who was a boy and who was over their age limit when the drone strike has taken out the entire block and there's just dust and a bit of blood and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, these are children. These are kids just being killed and ignored, based entirely on their sex. And it's so weird to say that.
Yeah, and then the feminists will come along and they say that women are worse affected by war. They'll say, women are the primary victims of war. Which is a Hillary quote, who we all know, because they lose their husbands and brothers to it. which is sociopathic, frankly. But this is why, one of the reasons why people got so absolutely peeved off when they tried to make a badass female soldier with a hook arm and put it in Battlefield, I think it was. And
I think it was Call of Duty.
Call of Duty Battlefield, one of those games. They put her in there in a World War II setting and had her be more badass than all the men put together. And yeah, I was right, it's Battlefield. And people got incredibly angry about that because, I mean, it just pisses on all of the sacrifices of men who have fought and died and been drafted against their will as war slaves. And sorry, I am quite angry, but it just absolutely, it besmirches them, it betrays them, and it treats them as disposable. This is where you see, like, the people got angry when a certain, I won't say the name, group had the dead, and they from World War II, local dead, and they didn't include women, and there was a big outcry because they didn't, like, well, not a big outcry, but like a feminist outcry, which they interpreted as a big outcry. There probably wasn't really any outcry, but then the group who had this list is treated like sexists, and they're keeping women off the list and stuff like that, when actually it's probably just the case that they went to the local memorial and they read the names of the dead off of the big slabs, who are the dead from the wars, not the dead from bombings and things like that. The men who actually went and fought in these wars, and they're, I don't disagree that if there are women among the dead, they should be counted if they're they were helping the war effort and stuff like that. And even if they weren't, we should count civilian deaths as war casualties. But it just shows, the way they over celebrate the contribution of women in World War II. It can be really quite disgusting sometimes. I mean, yeah, there were female spies and they did a lot of great work. There were female code breakers working with Alan Turing, and they did a lot of great work. But that's one small part of the story, and the main part of the story is that so many men were killed that in places 40% of the population of men was just evaporated. And this is the feminists often, when this happens, feminists often celebrate this sort of stuff as a major victory for feminism, when 70% of the population is women in Rwanda, because all of the men were just wiped out. And they'll try and say that they'll try and reframe stats like that so that it looks like a lot more women were killed. But in the actuality of it is that only 1% of casualties in the Rwandan genocide were women.
Yeah, that's not mentioned.
Statistic.
Yeah. This is the same for most genocides. What people don't tell you is that they'll label the victims of genocide people, but it's very illuminating if you go on DuckDuckGo or another search engine that hasn't been specifically curated and type in genocides, and then in quotes, most of the victims were male or some variation of that. Try different variations, you'll get different articles. And you will find
like this phrase buried at the bottom of articles where like there's a huge Boko Haram genocide or something, and they just wiped out all of the men, and they might have accidentally killed one woman or something. But like most of the victims were men, but let's call them people. Or one other thing they like is villagers. They might have wiped out the entire male population and left the women completely alone, but all you'll hear about is the villagers were, half the villagers were wiped out, something like that. That's how they're afraid.
Actually, what they did in Africa with those boys was that they would say 2,000 people wiped out, 3,000 villagers killed. And you dive into the numbers, and usually they're just talking about boys. They're talking about, 2,000 boys got killed, one girl got killed, 3,000 boys got killed, and that would be it. 5,000 boys got killed, 700 boys killed. And it's just this over and over and over. And they almost are afraid to say that all these boys are dying, because then you would think people would have some level of outrage. But it doesn't seem to be the case, at least in America, from my view. I'm sure the UK is the same. I'm sure Australia is worse, to be honest with you. I think that's also a place where they tried to just overcompensate, or excuse me, not overcompensate. Yeah, let's say overcompensate in regards to the entire movement of feminism, where they try to engage with it as often and as obviously as possible. And if you ever say anything against it by stating, well, why are you creating, let's say a law that's based on the amount of money that's made, is just, by working class people, and say that women make significantly less due to the pay wage gap, which is entirely based on like men and women, not anything else other than that. And you have this weird attack from like media accounts, from like mass media, from just societal recognition being very one-sided. It's crazy. It actually looks crazy from the outside looking in. Once you notice it, you don't stop seeing it everywhere you go.
I think.
Yeah, well,
Go on, Mark.
I mean, no, I was just going to say, and then they'll tell you that men universally hate women, and it's only you who don't hate women, and only if you protest and like say, no, I don't hate women. But even if you say that, they'll still accuse you of having unconscious biases, so you still hate women. And the only reason this all works is because everybody really, 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 really loves women. There's just no other way around it.
Yeah, I've just posted 4 links in the chat for different sort of videos and articles and things about sort of male sacrifice, as it were. First one is local to me, sort of where my kids actually live, and you just read that the first little piece of the article: 439 miners and 1 rescuer killed in an explosion in the South Wales coal mine. I've actually been to the memorial because it's right on the site of the old mine, and they've got names and ages of some of the victims in like a stone semicircle on tiles. And I think the youngest in there was actually my son's age, which is 15, which is a scary statistic to say the very least. First video I've posted is 2 Jeremy Clarkson documentaries. If people who obviously watch Top Gear will know about Jeremy Clarkson, but in the first one, there's an excerpt from a last letter that one of the soldiers wrote to his family, which included the line, I'm one of the ones who's given up my unimportant life. You hear that kind of thing, you just think, why just. But the problem is, there's the last article, which is about the white feather and the white feather movement. You know, when men do decide that their lives are worth something, they get shamed into going and fighting in a war that they want no part of. So, you know, it's it's a scary thing.
Of course, feminists will then try and deflect this by saying it's all men's fault, blah blah blah. But we're not actually like really saying that this is a gender blame fault, even though we could blame women for the feather movement because that was an all-woman movement. But we're not trying to blame people based on gender. We're blaming social norms, human nature, tribalism, ideology, and identity politics. These are the things we blame. It's not people. It's, well, there are some specific named people, but as a whole, we're blaming like the impetus of society itself. We're not trying to say that any one person is specifically, you know, the cause of any one group is specifically the cause of this, because we know that all groups pitch in. The women brought up their children to think this way is specifically what I'm getting at. The mother who brought her son up is the reason, like, she brought her son up to think like this. But we're not blaming, like we can blame her specifically, is what I'm getting at. But as a whole, we don't blame women, we don't blame men, we blame society, and so on. Sorry if that was a bit garbled.
We blame feminism. It's that simple.
Well, I do blame feminism. I do blame the ideology of feminism, because it was actually the suffragettes who they stopped their campaigning on the vote to do the white feather thing, and I think that was very clever, because you don't want the people thinking, hold on, men got the vote because they're drafted, so why, you know, well, actually, to be honest, most men at the time didn't have the vote, but that's
they didn't get it
nitpicking a
until
bit.
after
But
1918, after the end of the
no,
First
they
World War,
didn't.
which is
Yeah, you're right.
something
I'm mixing things up here.
Yeah, a lot of people actually forget that the young men that were being sent off into the meat grinder of the First World War did not have the right to vote. So, and it's something I've seen on like GMB when Piers Morgan was on there and what have you. They were talking about it a couple of years back. You know, old women, you know, got the vote in 1918 and what have you. Well, yeah, so the vast majority of men that were killed or that were old enough to have been sent off for the First World War. At the end of the day, they didn't have the right to vote either. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I got a bit mixed.
Yeah, men had to die for the average man on the street to be given the right to vote. So when people talk about the suffragettes and what have you, I always say to them, you have to ask yourself, who did the suffragettes want to be equal to? Was it the men dying in the trenches of World War One? Was it the men that died in that mine in Senghenydd in South Wales? No. They wanted to be equal with the elites. And that hasn't changed in over 100 years of feminist activism. It's still there. You only have to go and watch that Jordan Peterson appearance on Q&A in Australia. He wiped the floor with them, absolutely destroyed them. But they were only ever really interested, or they're only interested in politics and CEOs and things like that. They're not interested, as he pointed out, in things like bricklayers, which is 99% male. So, yeah, I mean, the ideology of feminism is just an absolute joke. And luckily, over the last few years, more and more people are waking up to the fact. There's more and more people speaking out. And the more people speak out, the angrier the real diehards start to get, and the more aggressive they get, the more they attack people that used to be allies. And the more that carries on, the more we just look like superheroes at the end of the day.
Yeah, the freeing of Twitter, if it takes, is definitely going to speed that along, because these people, they only manage to survive by controlling spaces like Reddit and so on. But if Twitter is suddenly able to, you know, if MRAs and Twitter can suddenly fight on an even playing field, we're going to win. Like, we are going to win Twitter. There's just no way to stop us if we can talk as freely as you can.
We did win Twitter today.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think this is partly because we're not being nerfed anymore. Or at least not as much.
And you wonder, pre-Elon, would we have hit number one?
It's hard to say, but we never did before. But I mean, they have taken out a lot of the algorithm and stuff like that was keeping like people like us down. So I think that that probably did play a big part in it. And the people who are like doing Women's Entrepreneurship Day, they are not getting that much traction, weirdly. But it is some quite big, like some companies and people like the US Department and some general guy who are all tweeting about it. We need to get in there and we need to tell them what day it is. But just to go back to what I was saying before, I did make a mistake with the suffragette thing. The anti-suffragettes were actually worried that they would have to take on male responsibilities, and that's why they were against it specifically. And I sort of misremembered that a little bit. But the suffragettes were terrorists. The suffragists were peaceful, but the suffragettes were terrorists who sent letter bombs and so on, and people forget that too, and they're now praised as heroes in school. If we did that, they would never let us forget it. They never let us forget random men who do crimes, so you can bet they'd never let us forget that.
I was just about to say, we should be very, very careful with Elon Musk, because we don't actually know where he is or what he's thinking.
Oh, by no means am I saying I trust him blindly. I will say this.
Vacuum cleaner in the background.
I'll say, sorry, it's the leaf blowing mafia. There's nothing I can do about them. They come and they blow leaves from one spot on the floor to the other, and then call that work. But anyway, I will say this about Elon. I think this is all I'm saying about Elon. At the very least, I think he's almost certainly less likely to be against the men's rights movement than previous ownership.
Yeah, he has tossed some pretty rotten people out. Like, it's amazing, like the rot he's uncovered in Twitter, like the actual fraud, like the actual illegal fraud, like selling blue check marks and things like that, for like 50 grand and stuff. But it's I think even though he did support Amber Heard for a while, he has backed off of that. So I think he is mutable to the facts, and he's a reasonable guy, and he's normal. Like, well, he's not normal, but he's a lot more normal than these people in terms of the way he thinks, as in he's not crazy, which is, I'll take not crazy and ambivalent about us over crazy and really hates us. So, you know, I think that's a win on our front.
I'd say that's fair.
I mean, even if he really hates us, I think he's think he's committed enough to free speech that he'll let us talk. He certainly doesn't seem to slap down the people who are saying that, are mocking him on Twitter.
Well, he's also recently reinstated Jordan Peterson's Twitter, by the way. So that's a something, I guess.
And the Babylon Bee and quite a few other people.
Yeah. He hasn't done Trump yet, I don't think. Although Count Dankula had Twitter going the other week because he pretended to be Donald Trump on Twitter and freaked everybody out. But that's just it's just Dank being Dank, isn't it? The thing was they fell for it for about
That's classic.
half a day or so, and then they realised when they actually looked at the username, it said Count Dankula, who was actually doing it, and then they just stopped reacting. So I think he stopped now.
Yeah, these people aren't very smart. I heard Trump was back, and I was like, no, he's not. I would know if he was back. Because, like, the newspapers and all that would have been saying for days that Elon's going to put Trump back on Twitter, and it would have been announced and all that sort of stuff. And there would have been a whole, nope. I didn't believe it for a second. That's why I never, even mentioned it on the Discord.
They would be crying about it from the rooftops if it happened. Nobody would be able to escape it.
Yeah, if it was real, we'd know. It's for one thing, they'd have the Trump tweets off of Truth Social to prove it and stuff. But anyway, moving back onto our topic, International Men's Day. Has anyone seen any big media hoo-ha about it, the likes of which we have seen before many times?
Nope, not a thing.
No, not one thing for me.
I haven't seen.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, there's not been any big outlets promoting it. I mean, the likes of Piers Morgan and that haven't spoken about it once, or anyone like that. But by the same token, there's not been any kind of, from what I've seen, negative press. So that's interesting. Is it the case that this movement has now become mainstream? Possibly, or ideas have become mainstream?
I think they'd be afraid of giving it negative press. I think they think that if they give it negative press, it'll have the opposite effect.
Yeah, it did for years. I mean, how did I find out at International Men's Day? Because they were bleating about it. That's how I found out about it. But I do think that they are trying to be silent now. They're trying to be clever. But it's too late. It's all over Twitter today. It's number one. And, the whole Johnny Depp thing is still trending. Still trending months later. And I don't think they can stop it now that Twitter's free. It's just going to spread and spread and spread. I mean, last year, I think it was, Yo Sushi got on board with Movember. Like, they had leaflets for Movember right there in the shop. And I took one and I showed you guys. And I thought that was really, really good. That's that's a very healthy men's topic to get on board with prostate cancer. And encouraging people to grow a mustache. It's incredibly wholesome. It's... I think that's the way to do it. Like, we don't... we just sort of keep pushing and we don't let them get away with the BS. We just make sure they can't get away with it.
I think Movember, of any kind of initiative for men, I think that's been a real game changer, to be honest with you, because it is so sort of wholesome. But they've gone from what was a prostate cancer charity or raising awareness for prostate cancer to talking about suicide and mental health and everything else. And it's going to snowball. And my only worry is, somebody's been involved with this for a few years now. Are we going to be able, when this does eventually snowball and catch on and everything, are we going to be able to stop things going too far? You talk all the time, Mar, about the pendulum swing.
Yeah.
Are
Yes.
we going to be able to stop it?
Yes,
I think
and
you can see feminists infecting it, but yeah, that too.
I'll tell you why I think we can. Because humans' natural tendency is the woman are wonderful effect, and the male empathy gap is naturally occurring. So it's getting men to be seen as equal is a very tough ongoing battle. For it to snowball too far, I think it would be an impossible sell. It's hard enough to sell the idea to not mutilate a baby boy when he's born for no reason as it is. So selling male supremacy, I don't think is a risk.
Nobody's even advocating for it. I mean, we're too mainstream, ironically. Like, we're too middle of the road. Like, that would be a very, very hard sell if any of us, especially considering that like most of our leaders are women.
They have
Bottom
a
line
that
is-
and they never will, to be honest. I mean, how many times have we turned around and said, how is this movement misogynistic? Look at all of the women that are leading the charge. And they just go, well, that's internalized misogyny on their part.
Bottom line is, we're the good guys. We really are. It's not two sides with different opinions, and one has a point and others. No. We are the good guys of this story. Period. We are the protagonists of this movie. Period.
Yeah, you can tell because we're not the ones trying to manipulate people. Did anyone see those tweets I sent out? Like, about the Canadian homelessness thing, where they tried to twist these stats into saying the majority of homeless were women, but in fact their own stats and their own their own posters and things, they say that like it's 87% of men.
I think calling ourselves the good guys is maybe a little bit of a push. I think we are the ones on the right side of history, but we have to do an awful lot of bad to do an awful lot of good.
What do you mean? I mean, I see us as very clearly the right ones in the debate. Like we're very clearly on the side of what's good and what's just.
Yes, but we've got to force people to stop or to change their mindsets. We've got to force them to not just concentrate on women. And that's, to a certain degree, a bad thing to be doing.
Well, I don't see it as we're forcing people to stop focusing on women. I think it's forcing people to see the whole picture fairly and equally. We're not saying that women's issues should stop being ignored from now on. We're not saying that we should just ignore misogyny from now on. We're just saying be equal about everything.
I mean, this is really why they don't want to give us a foot in the door, because we would be very even-handed about it. We would purge out of the ideological nonsense, and we would have a very clear and fair system where nobody was, discriminated against on the basis of anything, really. I mean, in our, game plan, there's no closures of women's shelters. There's no anything like that. We just want to clean out the ideology and keep things nice and fair.
Yeah, we'd make them look bad by comparison. I'd love to see a reality TV show like Survivor with like 50 MRAs on one island or one half of the island and 50 feminists on the other half of the island. And just see how much better the MRAs do.
To be honest, I thought you were going to say put them all in one room and see whose ideology survives in the mind of the viewer. But
Oh my god, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have a major update.
go on.
I missed it. 11 hours ago, the UK hit, in fact, #1 overall on International Men's Day. Right there. Look in the text chat. The UK did hit #1. I said they only hit #2. They hit #1. That's for the whole UK.
You've made my day, Blue. I think that might be the note to take us out on, actually. If you want to, we can go into
Well,
free
I'm-
talk mode if you want.
I'm going to have to make an update on my video because I didn't give the UK enough credit. I said that they only went up to #2, which is still great, but no, the UK went up to #1. The #1 tweet 11 hours ago in the UK, International Men's Day, 56,000 tweets hit the #1 spot. I think it's only going to increase. It's only going to get more from here. Anyway, if you're joining us for the first time, we have these chats every weekend, every Saturday. The schedule in the future might change for the day and the hour, so keep up with the announcements channel. Generally, we have these every Saturday. We may be switching back to Friday, but we will, of course, let you know if that happens. It is still not even 4 p.m. Eastern time in the United States, so there is still time to get International Men's Day at least on the list in the United States. But we've done it. After years of fighting for it, after years of trying, International Men's Day was the biggest tweet in the world. We got the #1 position on Earth. And that says a lot. So that is me checking out Blue Orange 22. Thank you all. And next year, let's do even better.